All right.
Whenever you'd like to start. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. All right, so hi, I am Ron Casey. I'm curator for this exhibition. I'm
I'm Janelle Wilson. I'm one of the artists that are in the exhibition. It's amazing being here today.
And right behind you is the work. Yeah.
It's in the frame.
We're also joined by a couple of other artists and participants. Kate Spiller is here who will help me moderate. So we can do a hello.
Yeah, if you say hello, Kate, come on screen.
Hello, I'm here. My name is Kate. I did the opening essay to start, I guess, this show.
And we have a number of artists present as well. Hopefully we'll be able to talk with everybody as we go. So Kate and I have talked about how we're going to do this, and I have now forgotten exactly what we talked about. So how are we going to begin this?
I feel like what we really wanted to talk, or how we wanted to open this, was really just how this show came about. And so Ryan and I are old friends now. We've known each other for almost 20 years. And over that course of that time, we've had a lot of conversations, ongoing conversations about a plethora of different subjects. And something actually that we recently talked about was trauma. And, you know, Ryan's been doing a lot of work around loss and grief and trauma work, and I do trauma work within my specialty. And it's interesting because I feel like I was talking to Ryan about something that I took away from the show was, and actually, Bridget, from your first conversation, the artist talk, I believe, that y'all had in the opening, something I thought was great was you mentioned something where you said, you know, we don't really have the language, like our language isn't full enough for us to really talk about trauma. And that's something I come up a lot against with my clients and the people I work with. Is like, there's only a limited amount of words that we have to explain what we've gone through. And so I thought what was interesting about, you know, that statement and really resonating with me was like, what does it mean when we don't have the language, but we have images or stories that we want to share? So especially, I don't think there is any one way to deal with trauma. I don't think there's any right or wrong way. I think there's lots of different ways. And that was part of what I wanted my piece to be about, was really about what does it, you know, Ryan brought me this question of like, what does it mean for us to move forward? What does it mean to transform? And for me, it's all about expanding the way that we think about these things. So I think what I have gained from our ongoing conversations over the many, many years, also us just growing and changing as people, is that there is no right or wrong way to talk about things. But I love having that opportunity to share and hear stories. And even if they're not my exact trauma or my exact lived experience, we can find ways to relate. So that was something I thought that I noticed when I went through the book that you created for this show, of just how many times I saw these threads of like what is really coming up in these vastly different traumas that's overlapping, that, you know, are kind of like going through the whole show. That's all I have to say.
Like really good. We talked a little bit about this to sort of enter into the conversations that, as Kate mentioned, we've had so many conversations about trauma, and we've both grown considerably over the years. Kids' work, you know, and going for their master's degree, all that sort of informed our conversations, and so has the work that I've been doing curating and in my own work. And so I think what I was most interested in the show, and maybe why I chose the artists I did, is to sort of think about how we can be better at storytelling, and how we can be better at using photography as a catalyst for empathy and compassion, instead of just as these traumatic moments. And I think for me, that's almost like, I think, a bit of what we came up with, and sort of the questions. So because Kate and I have talked extensively about this, I thought maybe we'd start to open it up a little bit, and maybe use some of the questions that we started with to ask. We'll start with Janelle, and then we'll kind of go from there. Awesome. So we came up with a few questions. The question I basically started the exhibition with two questions. And the question was, can a photograph hold in resiliency, document, and reimagination? And the trauma is the mark, but then it's a photographic legacy memory that endures. Those are the questions I posed to myself before I sat down and did any of this. And, you know, on my end, I think I said yes. In fact, yes to both of those. But then the question comes up, well, how do we do that? And where do we go from this point? So I'm going to throw that to you. And so I guess a question I would have for you that relates a little bit to your work is, how does transforming trauma, what does it mean to you? Like, how does photography play into that for you?
Well, definitely with me, I know as being an art therapist, art is definitely something very important to me, seeing as photography. And I know with being at Stockton, my senior thesis was on the development of my mental health as well as my physical health. And that's when I just got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and I went partially blind, and that's how I found it. So that's what started my first series, was The Rest is Silence. And now with Raphael being the continuing series on that, I definitely wanted to kind of like use these photos as a sense of showing that to everyone, and also giving awareness that, you know, trauma comes in different forms. So with me and all the years of going through my treatments, going through my tests and everything, I just wanted my artwork to continue to show that there's many different forms of disabilities. It doesn't always have to be ones that you see all the time. It can be invisible, but each moment that I have definitely has changed me, and also sort of hoping that the viewer can see something change within themselves.
Right, and I think you've heard it before, but I don't think we also think about like physical ailments or things that happen to health-wise as trauma. But you know, if you expand on that, I think it absolutely is, and sort of changes the course, as you said. So and I think that there's a couple people, okay, in your work also to address that. And so, you know, for you, are there any other stories in the exhibition that sort of, you know, resonated with you as well? So, you know, basically like transforming the way you thought about it. Because I think for me, the work that I see in both the series definitely made me rethink how I define trauma in a way that I thought was really important. And so that happens to me in the work as you went through that. I'm just curious. I didn't think for a question.
No, when I went through, I definitely saw that there was really collective trauma, and seeing everybody's different forms of expression was very relatable, and also to using their body as a tool, using, you know, just and seeing them as they are, witnessing that. So, you know, I did see some similarities, but I think overall just having the body as a tool and having the photos be the representation of that, I think was something that stood out to me, but also kind of like helped me feel more welcomed into the show. Because definitely when you're having all these beautiful works together, it's kind of like, how do I fit it? But I think having just that idea of knowing that already, why do I have to think that I have to fit within trauma? You know, trauma, again, is different for everyone. My story is my story. Everyone else here has their specific story. So, no if I answered the question, you know, but I definitely am saying like to see everyone's form of their own existence within the show. It is beautiful. And again, like when I talk to my clients, I say, use your body, trust your body as a tool to share and provide that narrative, because people are going to have their own opinions, but you're the one that's in control of that story.
And can you tell us a little bit about your work? Because I think it would be relevant to a bit more.
So I work with children, adolescents, and some adults. I definitely went into that when I got diagnosed with MS, and I saw how helpful art therapy was. So I try to work with those who have medical trauma, and also too with mental health, and utilize their stories in a way that is expressed through art, because art isn't judging. You know, the person who is viewing it may judge, but again, they're reclaiming what happened to them. They're reclaiming that moment, that trauma that took, you know, their innocence, or took something, a part of another personality. So I try to frame it as a way, it's like you're in this safe space that we're both going to create, and also to knowing that whatever you do can be a line, it can be a scribble. You are being authentic, you are being yourself, so you can be prepared to be like this in the world. So that's mostly what I do with my work, and definitely learning a lot from Pratt. Definitely helped with utilizing the body, with dance, with sounds, with movements, everything ties in together when you're doing art therapy. So that's kind of.
And so, Kate, do you have some questions?
Do you want to maybe throw out one of the questions we came up and we can maybe get some other artists? I know there's a few people.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm also curious if any artists want to respond to the what does transforming trauma mean to you, and or does that even sound like it resonates with you? I think some people don't relate to transformation and relate it more to shifts or growth or whatever. So I'm just curious if anyone wants to share, and please just chime in.
I did have one thing to say about it. I don't know if transforming trauma is the right phrase for me, but more so transforming like my PTSD and kind of taking, like, the trauma doesn't change, but it's like transforming your narrative and going back to that thing about not having language to language around trauma. The images kind of transform the narrative of like who I am, which is a huge part of healing the trauma, because you're getting to be like who you want to be in yourself, whatever way you want to. The choice is really important, I think. So it transforms more so the aftermath, and then the fact that other people respond to it and that we can all go through trauma and do a show like this, for me, like transforms, like we're all survivors left behind after this, and the trauma is still there, but we get to do better and different things with it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Bridget answered this, because something that you said before about looking at the body in the show and how the body plays this like really pivotal part. And I immediately thought of Bridget's work. And what I was sort of curious about is how you saw, because I know we've talked about it, so maybe it's great to kind of share it with everyone, how the body plays a part in sort of how you address trauma in your work.
So probably the biggest component of my trauma healing has been the mind-body connection. I am a very smart and well-read person who tried to think my way outside of my trauma until probably a handful of years ago. And it wasn't until this like physiological part changed that my lived experience in my everyday life started to shift. So I knew things about my trauma. I knew that it wasn't my fault, but I didn't know it wasn't my fault in my body. It still felt like trauma. I still had very large reactions to things. I still was very upset at things that people who hadn't gone through what I went through probably would be. And for me, my trauma's come out a lot in chronic health problems. And that has really resonated with me. I also was a self-harmer for a really long time in a lot of different ways. So like shifting my body and also my neural networks, like learning how to self-regulate, has really closed the loop that just talking and thinking couldn't. And the pictures are part of that because they documented where I started, where I am. The scars are still there, I'm still here, but my face actually looks different. Like my eyes look different. And the way I relate to things is totally different. And my body's actually like changed as I've let the trauma go.
Yeah, and I thought it was so interesting to kind of think about, well, if you want to comment on the body, particularly like.
Yeah, definitely. What you say, Bridget, it is very important, because when you are going through those certain changes, and learning about your body through trauma, I definitely do talk about that a lot, because, I definitely understand with the self-harming, because I've done that as well, with dealing with the trauma. But your affect will really show a lot. Your eyes, your mouth, the way your cheeks are, tense face, the face really tells a lot, as well as the eyes. And, the body can still change. But like you said, your face can still show that trauma, and the having to, bring back yourself from dysregulation is also a process too, and a journey. And so I kind of want to ask too, like if it's okay, with your images, what came out most for you, with utilizing your body? to express your story?
What do you mean? What came
Like-
out of?
Like what was your full intentions for the viewer, like, and also too for yourself? Because I know what you're faced to, it speaks a lot when I look at it. Like I see the two different affects, like you see the trauma, and then the next photo, it looks like some weight is lifted off, you know. So that's what I get, but I kind of wanted to ask, what is it that you were hoping the viewer to see?
Well, I kind of never think about that beforehand. The viewer, whatever the viewer sees is whatever the viewer sees. I would have taken the pictures the same way if nobody ever saw them. But the thing that I thought, what you said, not just the eyes, if you look at my shoulders in the first one, they're almost up to my ears. And then in the second one, there's this space between my neck and my collarbone that I couldn't even make in the first one. And I was a similar weight in both these pictures. And when I saw them, I was so struck by like what my body was doing without me even trying to. And I think what came out for me personally, which I hope that people see, is that showing up as you are is okay. I have no ill feelings about the woman in the left side of these pictures. And actually seeing them side by side gave me a really large amount of self-compassion. But in the second one, there is this softening, and it doesn't mean that the scars go away completely or that you're a different person. It's just like growing past it. And I don't like the idea of trauma being left behind, getting over it, moving forward. You really, for me, it's a through concept. And that's why I did them exactly the same, so that they were kind of bookends of going through a bulk of the work.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of through. I always say with for me, because I always think about the idea that the trauma loss that is in my life, it's always with me. It just like the size of it changes each day. Sometimes it's a lot heavier. There's this great like a graphic that I saw once, and it's like someone with suitcases, and sometimes you have this one that's like you're barely able to hold. And other times it's like a purse, you know. And I kind of think of trauma and loss like that, where it's never not there. It's permanently a place. But depending on what that day is like, it's going to be harder to hold or easier to hold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I had even written in my statement, I think there was even something, and people have spoken about me this way, that I used to hold like the weight of so much on my back. All my traumas were developmental. So I don't know who I am without them. They're very much a part of me. So I used to like carry them around on my back. And in the statement, I said something along the lines of I used to carry them around, and now they're a smaller part of a bigger picture, but it's never not going to be my story. And I don't want it to not be my story. It's just, you know, you're just there.
Right. And it's such an important lesson, because I do think that we have a tendency in our culture and to just say to move out of it, right? Or
Yeah, to
move
get
through-
over it.
to get
Yeah.
over it. And you're like, that's never going to happen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like trauma and loss are these things that are inherently decide who you are the next moment. You know, I always talk about the idea that when you experience a loss or a trauma, you're basically keeping it with you, and you're a different person from that beginning to end, right? And you're never going to go back to that other person. So either to figure out who you are with it or struggle. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. So I know we have a couple of other artists kind of in the group. Does anyone want to talk a little bit about how, because this does happen quite a bit in this exhibition, how you are able to cope with other people's trauma, especially storytelling? So that's such a big part of the show. And I know some of your work also is about that. And so we're talking a lot about our personal trauma, but you know, how are you able to be present in other people's, to be a witness, I think is a great word that you used before. So.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me in this conversation. Super excited. I just want to just back up because it was a great conversation, so I wanted to listen. Tamara, if you don't know her, I wanted to just back up and just answer some of the other questions, because I also, like, you know, dealt with trauma. And I thought about that question a lot. How does transformation trauma mean to you? And I think, I'd be honest with you, for me personally, as a woman of color going through trauma from a young age up and being surrounded with other people who were going through severe traumas, I didn't know it was trauma. I didn't know it was transforming. I didn't think about it. It wasn't even a thing. It was a survival mostly. So even now, when I've created my work, when I started doing things, people would probably connect to it that have gone through trauma and stuff. But for me, I wasn't even considering the fact that I was transforming anything. It was just more of, this is my reality. I just assumed everyone went through the same reality. Like, so it is difficult sometimes for me when I tend to talk with people that have gone through trauma, and it's not because I'm being insensitive or cold or anything. I think in a way is I sort of shut myself down in a way because I assume it's like normal. So in a way, when I hear people, their traumas and stuff, and I'm talking to them and I'm documenting them, I learn from them as well to heal more than me saying, all right, well, I've been through worse. It's not even a comparison. I just learned, like, for myself, like, okay, it's an experience of healing,
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense, and hopefully it does. And if it doesn't, I don't know. You can come to my studio and yell at me later. And then how we use art as a tool of growth to document pain. Like, again, when I think for this exhibition, I had a collage, Mi mamá me dijo un sueño. So I think I realized that a lot of my photography, I used to just do like photography now. I take a lot of photos of different things and paint and do all these things and put them all together. And it's kind of weird. It's kind of like, that's my growth, it's kind of putting pieces together of different kind of traumas and surroundings and making sense of one thing, like having people have a story to like look at and then kind of go through a flow. I hope that makes sense as well. And I think
I'm just telling Michael to maybe turn the camera around so we could see the work that you're mentioning. I don't know how far this is gonna. Yeah, this.
This could end the whole show.
Yeah, it could. Well, possibly.
I can't.
Okay.
Sorry.
No,
It's
it's
beautiful.
oh, it's okay. It's in the corner. You don't have to go through all that trouble. Don't worry.
But it's like so close to us. I wanna-
No, I think that's
Right.
important too, Tamara, because being also too like a woman of color, I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, you're so resilient," but it's kind of like, no, this is just how it is. I have to get through every day, just like you. But at the same time, I feel like also too with, showing emotion can be too much. And definitely that is something I went through with my process of like, well, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're being too dramatic, or you're being angry Black woman. There's that stigma, and also too that extra step that has to be taken definitely with going through trauma. So I think, it
Right.
is important that you said that it's our survival. This is
Right.
what we live around.
And we have to, like, I'll just say this because I'm more interested in hearing everyone. Like the piece that I did, I took a photograph where I was hugging a plancha, an iron board. And I kind of separated, that was for like a piece of my mom talking the whole image is like based around my mother and certain things. And we have to really, I just want to say this, we have to normalize therapy. We have to normalize all that, especially in Black and brown communities. Because, the other day I had a discussion with someone who is an artist as well. And they went into this whole with that person struggling right now, and I just thought, I got a little frustrated, and I said, it's really easy for a person who is not of color to like have a meltdown and a breakdown and have that excuse of like, right now they're struggling. But a person of color is like, we're so like, well, we can't do that, because the second we do that, we're put in a place that either we're angry, we're sad, we're bitter, like all these like crazy emotions, And so I was thinking a lot about my mom, and before I created that piece and that whole conversation we had, and that was something she did quite well. She held on to it like it was this dear life, and she held on to her traumas. So when I dealt with my traumas, I just assumed that's what you're supposed to do. You hold on to it. You don't conversate about it. You don't talk about it. What happens in the house stays in the house. You don't complain about it. You just move forward, right? Even if you were a self, like, you know, I was a self-harmer too. That was not even the thought. Like, I was, get over it. Stop cutting yourself. What are you doing? We don't have time for this. You know, it was no conversation. So you just move forward and move forward. And all those pieces in that image, that photo that I took were in the behind, were all parts of different parts of conversations me and her had, and parts of childhood trauma and parts of all these things. And the front photograph is just kind of like how, you know, normalizing therapy, normalizing being able to talk about your feelings, being able to say, yes, I'm angry, I'm sad, being able to not feel afraid of being judged. It's kind of like the empowerment that you have, that we're able to even show this exhibition or be part of this amazing work. Everyone's work is beautiful. And the last thing I'll say, because I feel like I'm talking a lot. So I'm doing a really wonderful project where I'm working with women as well, and interviewing, talking to women and photographing them of Afro-Caribbean and Puerto Rico and feminism and all this other stuff. And yes, I'm learning more about myself, just hearing their traumas and their discussions, and more of the connection that we all have and how strong we are as women and stuff like that. So I am so grateful to all of you guys for having this exhibition, for being a part of it. And I'm just gonna sit back and listen. If you have questions, you can always just, you know, reach out to Ryan, she'll let me know or something. Or
Tamara, I actually have a follow-up question to what you just said. That's related to this very much. So the way that you speak about like how much trauma you went through, and then how it was dealt with, and then the mediums that you've picked, and the way that you put them all together, because trauma involves so much fragmentation. Do you feel like using the different mediums and bringing them together for a cohesive piece is like part of your rebuilding of your either narrative or healing or anything like that? Like, do you feel like it's representational at all of your actual process?
I think that's a really good question. And I think parts of it are. I'll be honest with you, a lot of times I end up creating something like that and I don't realize it's also healing for me, but it's more of like when people see my work or other women I've worked with, I wanted them to know I understand what they're feeling, right? I want to feel this I want them to feel that connection. And I think in a weird way, I don't think I'm healing from it, right? I'm like really ignorant in myself, like, oh, I'm just gonna do this because I want to share a story. But because I think, again, and I go back to this, with the constant, all the trauma that I've experienced and then people that surrounded me, I feel like if I dab too much into that, I don't even know what's gonna explode out of me. So I try to control it as much as possible. And I try to be more optimistic and control it. And so in my work, it may look dark, it may look whatever, but in a way, it's just, I think it's just like these taps that I'm pulling out, right? So yeah, maybe the answer to her whole thing was yes. Yes, Bridget.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I love it. I love your piece.
I had one thing that I was thinking on when I was looking through the work that I thought was really cool. It's such a like whatever word. Sorry, I'm a child of the 80s, so I just have all these like surfer words that I rely on, like cool, stuff like that, to describe very, very big things. But anyways, I feel like something that I was thinking about when we were talking about this question was also that, how do I want to say this? It's very interesting to see people put out work where they were talking about someone else's trauma that occurred generations ago and having the opportunity to explore it and maybe create a shift or a different relationship with it. And that's something that I talk to a lot about also with the people I work with, of like, I don't want to just say it's never too late in this like optimistic way, but more of the like, when you feel like you are capable or open to it or whatever, you can find ways to shift or see things differently or heal from things or so on and so forth. Because again, I want to make it clear, like none of my clients are coming to me if they're not ready to kind of like do that reflective work. I'm not, luckily I don't, I'm not in a situation where I'm giving people and then they're like we have to work through that. Definitely people are seeking me out because they're feeling like they're at a place where they want to find that opportunity and that shift and how we can do it. And speaking also, Tamara, to what you were saying about sometimes when you're working with people, you don't realize that that experience and that exchange is healing you as well. That was something I talked briefly about in my essay where, most of the time it's really funny when people hear the work I do and the people that I take on and like the traumas I take on, people are like, that's just so exhausting. You must be tired all the time. Or like, I would never want your job. And I just remind people like, I get to witness transformation. It's beautiful, like with people who have been carrying this for years. It is so powerful to witness people, whatever that might be, go through that and allow you the opportunity. Like I'm gracious that I'm given this opportunity to witness that. So I think it's to your point, I just think it's interesting because a lot of people hear what I do and they're just like, no way. And I'm like, I like it. I like being able to support that and witness it, So that was just something I wanted to share.
I mean, Kate knows this too. Everybody knows me as just reading, consuming media that is really sad. And everybody is, isn't that too much? And the answer is like yes or no, right? I think that maybe similar to what you said, Kate, for me, it is heavy. I'm not saying that what I do and the kind of projects I take on aren't heavy. They definitely are. But I feel like there's a little bit of a revolution that happens for me by showing the work, to get it out there for people to talk about, for people to connect with. And that part of it feels not at all sad. It feels important and meaningful. And I think my consumption of what my friends like to say is very sad things, winds up making me feel fulfilled, and it makes me feel like there's something I can contribute. And it kind of living in that space and knowing that you're sort of consuming those things, but also knowing that there's this other part of it, the side at the end, that's important. I don't know. So yeah, it's probably why you and I get along so well. We have a lot of, we have a lot of sad conversations, but neither one of us ever walk away sad, because I think it's that sort of commitment to progress that I think is pretty incredible. And sorry.
Oh, no, go.
Oh, no, I was just basically saying, like, I agree with you, Kate, too, because just seeing and hearing what my clients have gone through. And, every session, I always say, thank you for allowing me to be within your space and to hear what you have to say today. And thank you for showing up, because again, it's just like the little wins are so important, and, they don't have to share. But even doing that is a process in itself. So, we can talk about, oh, well, I brushed my teeth today. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this with me, because that could be very hard for them, but easy for somebody else. So, and I definitely, it's very hard to speak with my friends on some things too, because I do mobile response on the side as well. So I'm seeing a lot of crises. I'm seeing a lot of trauma, and walking in and having to be prepared for that. So, but again, it's just like they're just being a witness to that and having them trust myself to be a part of that is just a blessing.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that idea of witness is really important, because it's, for many of us, we might not be able to articulate or connect or share the experience that we're seeing in this show, or even the work that you do or the work that Kate does. But the little that we can do is bear witness, right?
Mm-hmm.
To become present and in front of someone and saying, I see it, I see what's happening. And it feels like that's like the smallest thing. And we really struggle to do it, though. I think, we as a culture are not necessarily good at looking at the hard stuff and really sort of going, I see it, I see what's happening. Even if you can't do anything about it, I think that witnessing is an important part of that process.
Just saying, I see you.
Right.
I see you for who you are.
Absolutely.
It's so important.
And Ryan and Kate, I hope you guys realize, I'm like going to speak on behalf of the artist, but I'm sure I'm not alone. You guys have made this like amazing, beautiful space for like all of our little pieces of brokenness and healing and whatever we all brought to the show. Like this show is an amazing witnessing that's been up for months and have like allowed all these people to process our own, other people's, like, and I'm not happy that there's enough people that this show is as many people as it is, but there's also such a sense of belonging when you walk into that space.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not going to speak for Kate, but I kind of feel that's a little bit of what we talk about a lot, is the idea of community care, right? And I think that's, we talked about this as well,
Many times.
And I think that the idea is that individually we shouldn't be bearing the weight of all this. We should be bearing the weight together, right? Because it's easier that way, but also it's important that other people share in those experiences. In Kate's essay, so much of that essay is about the idea of community and shifting our focus on individuals, taking ownership, but also saying, but what are the institutions that are causing this, right? How as a community can we support and help, and I think that's something we're not talking about. But again, I don't know if the show worked in that way. I mean, that's definitely something I think we both talked about that we hoped would be a part of that process. Kate can talk a little bit more about that too.
Yeah, I think something that thank you so much, Bridget. That's such kind words, and I really appreciate it, because something that I think about a lot that I keep been ruminating on, I guess, over the past 2 years is this concept of like safe spaces, and how really, like, for me, I shouldn't say for everyone else, but for me, really creating a quote safe space is really about creating a supportive space where people can take risks. And I think what we have, unfortunately, or depending on your outlook, some people think it means like, okay, I'm safe here, I can like, but I'm talking about it more from like, you can take a risk and be vulnerable with those around you. And I will say that is what I felt with this show. I felt like this is, I don't know how else to say it. It's like people were just showing up as themselves. And when people show up, this is such a random, I do this a lot, so I have ADHD, but Bjork put out an album, I forget, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. And it was the first time I was like, Bjork is showing up as Bjork. It just was like this vulnerable, you're, like just giving it all. And I want to say, I say that, and I know it's such a funny comparison, but I just feel like everyone in this show showed up, not in this, like the way that I think we are told we're supposed to present trauma, which is either not presenting it at all or being like, here's my big mess, but instead being like, this is the way that I want to create my story. This is the way that I want to share it. And having the opportunity to work with Ryan, who did a beautiful job at curating this, I feel like every piece had its place and nothing was rubbing up on something else. It wasn't like well, I had it worse. It was very much like we all have, like, we're all carrying and holding this. And I just think that's beautiful. So I wanted to just chime in on that real quick, because that was something I noticed when I was looking over these pieces.
Can I say one more thing too about the community aspect? I was listening to a podcast this morning. Ezra Klein for the Times interviewed Bessel van der Kolk, who, if anybody doesn't know him, he is like the trauma person when you talk about trauma. And he brought up, they were talking about his book, The Body Keeps the Score, and he actually brought up that like things like 9/11, huge trauma, people have a much easier time dealing with it because it's a community trauma, and there's a space to grieve, there's a space to talk about, there's a monument, you can go back to it, you can stand there crying, nobody's going to judge you. But when it comes to things like your family abusing you, nobody wants to talk about that. Similar to what Tamara was saying, like it does not leave the house, and things even like with the Me Too movement, as an incest victim, I can tell you, you tell people you're a rape victim and you tell people you're an incest victim, people nobody wants to hear that your brother molested you. No one. And you can't talk about it. So on top of not being able to deal with the trauma, the community completely leaves. And then your community that you were born with, your family, gets taken away from you. So then you're left to process all of this essentially on your own. And then every other difficult life event, because they keep happening, life waits for no one, that survival thing that, we were talking about before, that just keeps happening. And I think that this show, because you've both let everybody show up as they are, it is our version of coping in a community way where you don't have to, there may not be a monument, but there is a room in Trenton now where like these little pieces of us have all lived and nobody had to shut themselves down. And we all got to kind of like witness everybody and make it public in a way that's not messy or stoic. It's this like happy, healthy medium. So
Yeah.
thank you for that as well, guys.
And I think you bring up a very great point, Bridget, because I've always said, I always have to make myself and my trauma comfortable for everybody else. And it's so tiring to have to do that because, I've had many experiences where I've shared my trauma and it's made people uncomfortable. And I'm like, but why? Is it offensive to you that I'm sharing this? But it then brings you back into that state of like, I don't want to say nothing. It's not empowering. It's more of like, I'm regressing more than improving and growing. And I'm really glad that you shared that because with trauma, it's not our job to make people feel comfortable. It really isn't. And I know that sounds arrogant, but it isn't our job, and it's so important to be able to have that trust and to be able to be prepared to share because the trauma itself comes into it sharing with someone and then them saying, stop, please stop. That already is traumatic. That is silencing, that is erasing, so this show, Ryan, and Kate, you did not tell us to stop. You tell us to keep going, keep sharing, keep being. And I think this is, I told Ryan before that for me, my intentions is to grow again with this show. This is me releasing that fear of sharing my trauma and more as a use of empowerment because I need to be true to myself as well as when I'm showing myself to others. And I'm not going to allow anybody else to tell me to stop. And I really was afraid to share, but I'm like, that already is the trauma response. And I need to use this moment to share and not worry how other people are feeling for once, so I'm piggybacking on everyone, just saying thank you for allowing me to form into the butterfly I need to be, because when butterflies have to die again to grow into this beautiful, transformative, beautiful piece of, delicate creature. Here I am mumbling, but but I just want to say thank you for not telling me to stop.
I think I almost felt like I was forcing you to be in the show. But no, I mean, I wasn't forcing, but
no, I was like, I don't want to do it.
Yeah,
Ryan.
but I think that's actually pretty consistent across the board with the couple of shows, the last few shows I've done is that there's been a lot of, I wouldn't say resistance, but uncertainty about it. And I think what you just said sort of clues me in a little bit on why that is. Because I think if people have told you to stop telling your story so many times, I think that you get silent, right? I mean, that's something I talk about a little bit in the essay is that like trauma is silence, right? That's the biggest part of it. And I think there is like a tight rope I have to walk to kind of make sure that I'm not forcing anyone into a situation where they're uncomfortable, but also making sure that I can support them in the best way I can. And I think, just in your case, we were talking before and, Janelle made a comment about being authentic. And I remember thinking like, it's like, you are the most authentic person I've met, and it's always hard to see ourselves and be compassionate and kind to our experiences and to be okay, like you said, with the discomfort. I live in being uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable all the time. So like, I think for me, giving someone else the ability to be, well, I'm going to be comfortable, even if it doesn't make you comfortable, I think is a pretty incredible thing. And high praise on my end, because I think that I hope that's the case.
Yeah, well, with discomfort comes growth, and us as a society, discomfort is taboo.
Right. And hard conversations are are taboo.
Yeah.
Which is, what I think the show is really in. I'm going to kind of go back. Is there anything else that we sort of want to share and talk about? I know that we're approaching our question period, but I figured I'd ask beforehand. I'm just going to take a look at my notes. Michael knows I love my notes.
We did have one request for the two of you to reintroduce yourselves.
Sure.
There
Oh,
was
okay.
The mic problem early on.
Sure.
Okay.
Go for it.
My name is Janelle Wilson. I am one of the artists in the show. I'm also too an art therapist. My show is called Raphael, which is documenting my medical and mental trauma.
My name is Ryan Casey. I'm the curator of the exhibition. I am an artist and educator as well. And most of my tutorial projects and my personal work as an artist deal with loss, trauma, and memory. That's mostly what I do.
Yeah.
Right. It's pretty
Do
good.
awesome things.
Yeah.
Do amazing things.
How about Bridget? Can you just-
Oh, yeah.
We already heard Bridget because they were on.
Okay.
they were on live.
Okay.
So, something that I think Kate and I were both talking about. It's interesting because we had a kind of response to this outside the show, and it made me start thinking about this. We talked about this like 2 hours ago, I think. And so we came up with the question, what would you like your work to inspire? So for example, often people say, I want my work to inspire hope in people, but we spoke about like, what we're curious about is like, what else could there be? Like, what else do you want people to get from the work? And we had a really great response about the idea of inspiring. And I thought that might not be the right word, really upfront. And what did we settle on? Not inspire. What was the other word that we said?
Was it? I mean, I think when I was like trying to like think on this question, it's just, I just feel like when we talk about trauma, everything is talked about terms of like, kind of back to this conversation of resilience. Like you get like this pedestal of like, oh, it's there to inspire you and to like do all these things. I'm like, sometimes it's not about inspiration, or sometimes it's not about, you know what I'm saying? Like personally, like as a survivor of many things, like I don't always want to be like I did it, so can you. Like sometimes it's more just about like, I'm putting out my stuff because I got to put out my stuff. And what I really want people to take from it is maybe that they don't have to be afraid of that uncomfortable conversation around trauma. Like, so that's what I think we were kind of talking about, was how to I loved our feedback also about what would you like your work to inspire, and changing it to maybe like, what would you want, how would you want it to be received, or how would you want it to be utilized, or what kind of impact would you like it to have? And if that's too vague, or if you've answered that question too many times, because I also know that's a question I feel like everyone gets asked, is like, what did you want your work to do? Then don't answer it. That's fine too. We can just have an open conversation.
I think for me, what I would want my work to give people is maybe a voice that for a lot of people that can't and are not able to share it. And even if it's not the same story or similar or close to it, I honestly, I like to think that I want to be a voice that shows or exhibits work, through photography or, anything I do that gives people hope and sort of like, okay, she's someone that does it. And I'll share this really quick story because it'll explain a little bit fast, and I'll try to be fast. So when I was little, like often me and my brother would be out in Trenton in the streets and stuff. And, we spent a lot of time, and, I won't go into details of all that, but we would often go to the library. And because my English wasn't that great, I used to always just go through books and, kind of go through something. My brother went straight to any comics or anything he could find. And I would just sit somewhere. And one day I sat down, I was going through all these books, and I found Frida Kahlo, right? Like some of her images. And I just started laughing. I was like, this girl is crazy. Who's this woman, right? Because it was all in English. I didn't understand what I was reading. So I ran with the book to my brother and I showed him, and he was like, her boobs, like that was obviously we were really young. And maybe like, I'm gonna say like 10 or something. It was just like ridiculous young. And so we're like staring at it. And I walked out of there thinking, one day I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna be in some library, you know, and you're talking about a girl who already experienced trauma, who, you know, we slept in the streets, we did all this stuff. So it wasn't like, it was like almost like a seed implanted in my head that, you know, as cliche, I feel like, you know, it's just Frida Kahlo. It was like a little seed that just like popped in my head, that I knew that I saw a Latina in a book somewhere, and I was like, I'm gonna do that too. You know, fast forward later, years later, I'm here now. And so when I think about that question, I guess for me, it's like, I just want to plant seeds, you know, and it may not be the same story. We may not have the same trauma or the same thing, or maybe, but just planting those seeds that it's okay to actually, you know, share it, talk about it, share about it, or even if you don't want to, because it's like not forced, like knowing that someone survived it and did something that you can too. It is like, it sounds like, you know, a Lifetime fairy tale little paragraph thing. Like I feel like a movie should come out of that, but I definitely just, that's my biggest goal leaving as an artist for anything I do. That's the biggest, like, that's my zone.
Thank you for sharing. That's a great answer and a great picture.
I definitely would say for my artwork, I would use the word invite. I hope to invite the thought that trauma can still be talked about and that there can be a safe space for the person as well as for the individual going through. So I kind of, for the way that I do my photos, I want to invoke the feelings in that individual that may have been pushed into their subconscious or silenced. So it's kind of like inviting that individual, whomever is seeing my work, to tell themselves or say themselves, it's okay. You know, but not put me on a pedestal, please don't quote me, you know, kind of thing. But just showing that it's okay to share and that you're safe.
That is also a great answer. I love these answers. Thanks. Yeah.
Bridget, do you want to answer it, or do you, Kate?
Bridget goes. Yeah.
What?
I said Bridget should go. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Tamara and Janelle had really beautiful answers. I think I inadvertently answered it before when Janelle asked what I was hoping for people to see, and I just don't hope for that. I kind of just show up, whatever that does for people. I don't know. It kind of, I think if I thought about it, I wouldn't do anything. I would just be like paralyzed in fear, because I also feel like Ryan, I probably really wasn't going to participate in this, and then you were like gave it a little like elbow grease,
Right.
and I was like, you wanted me to present like the other women and then like their stories, and I'm like, no, I think I should just do me. And then I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. And then I did them, and I actually did I should share that I did the 2 updated pieces specifically for this show, because I had shown the older work at a talk for JKC earlier this year for the work that I've done with other women called The Art of Empowerment. And I just wanted to, I don't like, there's a quote, some artist, I'm terrible with remembering who said what, but there was a quote that like an artist promised that instead of just showing up with masterpieces, they would show every brushstroke. And I guess for me, that's a big part of my work, is that I get really resentful when people think I arrived as who I am. And I think it's totally fine to like expose all the graceless, crazy long journey ways I got here. And I just want to I guess my answer is I want to normalize that. I really don't like the shame, and I really don't like the silence, and I refuse shame. I always have. I don't like it. There's no reason anybody should ever have to feel ashamed of going through difficult things or being upset about it. So I like to normalize it as much as possible.
That's also a great answer. And I feel like, Brian, you'd asked me like why I do it. And I guess I feel like I came to my work really largely also for all the reasons that you all cited, and also normalizing it. And I really, really think we need to get back to a place of holding each other in humanity and humility and compassion and the complexity. And again, like I am not going to tell anyone who has been harmed that you have to give that grace to whoever harmed you. Like, no, that's not my place to say. That's yours to make. But I am going to say, I think we all, again, because I'm speaking from an American society experience, because I didn't grow up here, but I've spent a lot of time here. And I feel like there's just this, like everything that has been shared, there's just, we don't talk about it. Everything has to be behind closed doors. Everything's like hush hush, but like y'all talking about it behind closed doors. So we might as well become more practiced in how we talk about these things. So clearly I don't want to normalize trauma, but I want to normalize the acceptance that this is something that happens. And I talk about it a lot of harm is going to happen. How can we be more prepared to talk about harm? How can we be, I think I quoted it in the essay I wrote where Mia Mingus says, violence does not happen in a vacuum. And if it wasn't Mia Mingus, I apologize. It might've been Mariam Kaba, but like that our systems are also creating and influencing and impacting the way that we interact. So my approach is, if we can all individually start to consider and reflect, like, who am I bringing to this situation and how have I been impacted and what have my experiences been and what assumptions am I carrying and what have the systems taught me? How have I been conditioned? It's both. It's not one or the other. So that's a long way of saying that I just really want to have more spaces to talk about these things because I think they're important.
So I'm going to answer it as like in a weird way. So as a kid, I was really sensitive, not surprising to anyone who knows me. I was a really, really sensitive kid. And I remember very distinctly people in my life, family members telling me to just not be upset, right? Like, don't be upset about that. Whatever that thing was, it didn't matter big or small. Just the mere presence of me being upset or me feeling something so profound and so difficult was hard for them to witness. And I think a show like this and the show I did at Stockton, I think a big part of it is I just want people who feel a lot of things, that feel like they're taking in the world, to be able to know that there's a space for them to exist in and that they can feel all those things. And that even if it's hard, and that if you're too sensitive, maybe that's just because you actually are feeling how hard sometimes the world is, and that's okay. And so I hope in a situation like this, which is a hard show, I'm not saying it's not, but that's okay to feel sensitive and feel raw and hurt, while also acknowledging that you might feel connected and feel like you're part of a community, like that those things can all exist in the same space. Because I think we tend to tamper, right, that sensitivity, that compassion down so much on kids, and then as adults even more, that maybe we need more spaces like this, or what you do, what Kate does, where people feel like they can feel all those things and no one's going to tell them to shut it down, calm down, don't be so upset, don't express that. All that stuff does not go well as an adult at all.
Yeah.
At all, And so a little bit of my intent in these shows is to give a space where people feel like they can actually be who they are and feel who they are. And, no one's going to shut that down.
Can I add one thing to that, Ryan? Because I think it came up, the artist talk that we had with me and Camilla and Hannah, I think that one of the best things that came out of that was, Hannah had some very strong feelings that healing can't involve anger, and it has to involve forgiveness. And again, my anti-shame, I'm like, no, mine actually involved cutting an extraordinary amount of people that were in my immediate family out of my life. And I think that the show in general, that taught all the platforms that you've given us, I think that it's not that somebody's right or wrong. It's that there are a million different ways to deal with the same thing, and all the feelings. Yes, healing can also involve anger. And I think that people just want to say you're healed, you forgave, you're over it. And it's nice to hold that tension. And I think the show holds that tension really, really well.
Yeah, I almost feel like this, I don't know, maybe some of you haven't experienced this, but I almost feel like the show is my way of saying, don't tell me to calm down. I think a lot of the shows that I do are just sort of making a point that don't tell me to calm down. Don't tell me not to feel this. And like you said, there's so many different experiences, and people's reactions to things will range from sadness to anger to feeling resolved and feeling okay and forgiveness, but there's no right or wrong way to do it. And then all the different experiences are valid. You know, that validity that we give to however this is going to happen is how it's going to happen and what's important for you. You know, nobody's path or experience is going to be the same for them. Yeah,
Exactly. It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you.
right.
You know, and that's something that I learned from hearing from others. And I was like, that question is amazing. Is, you know, you always hear, what's wrong with you? Well, why are you doing that? But when you hear what happened, that already is inviting, you know, and like, okay, maybe they're open to, you know, hear my story. So that's definitely can be a start for society to start asking that kind of question.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's a little bit, I think, you know, I don't want to speak for Kate. They'll kind of step in for that, but that's a little bit of what I hope for the show is that we sort of start that conversation where maybe someone goes home and they talk to their family members and be like, hey, you don't want me to talk about this, but I am going to talk about this now. And to sort of take back a little bit of that ownership of what we're feeling, and that nobody gets to sort of tap that down and make us be a version of ourselves that we're not quite comfortable with. Yeah. So I don't know if we've covered everything, but if anybody has any questions or directed to anybody here or virtually, yeah, I mean, this is all open. Any questions? We have comments, but
Yeah, who has questions for us? Hard hitting questions.
Like, bring it on.
Yeah. Talking about conflict. Let's do this.
Kate's ready.
I'm ready. I do this all day.
Yeah.
this is everyday work for us.
It's true. Yeah.
I was going to say something that I wanted to respond to when you said, Ryan, when you said, don't tell me to calm down, which is like one of our favorite things that Ryan and I seriously text at each other when someone does that. Is like one of the first things I talk to my clients about, which is we can't control other people. And I think when people remember that you can't control other people and what they're going to do and how they're going to respond, that can be applied to healing, which I really think needs to be we need to remember that, you know, especially when you're engaging with someone who's taking a risk and wants to share their trauma with you. Again, we go back to that is a gift. And if you don't have the opportunity to, if you don't feel skilled in that, I'm not saying you can't step away or you can't reassess and be like, hey, like, I actually don't think I have the space, or like, I don't know if I'm feeling like, of course, but if someone's willing and wants to share, I agree with you, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. Someone just asked, where do we go to read the artist statements? And Ryan, I've been sending everyone the flip book that you sent me, the link to that. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, definitely. You can put that in the chat. We have a catalog for the show with both our essays as well as everyone's artist statements and images. So please, everybody.
There's also the 4K video.
Right.
On the website, we can pause the video and make the statement.
Yeah, that too. There's a couple of different ways. Yeah, there's also a video on the JKC Gallery site that's a 4K video where you can pause and you can look at everything, including the statements. So accessible in different ways.
There's one question at the beginning of this conversation that I do want to mention. The question was, who can I contact for permission to use some of the text in the catalog to help educate people about trauma, like family members and perhaps child protective services? I didn't answer that because I wasn't sure. Ryan, would that be a question for you to then, you would get consent from other people?
Yeah, I think that that person, whoever you may be, just maybe email me or the gallery and they'll forward it to me. And whoever, like whatever statement you're looking at, what I can then do is sort of forward that information to the artist. And they would be the person that I would think would be the approval one way or another. Yeah.
I hope that answers that.
Any other questions or?
Any questions in the gallery?
All right. Yeah, no. So I just want to say thank you. I know the show's still up for, this week, but just, I say it in the catalog and hopefully everyone reads the acknowledgements, especially the artists. But I just thank you for trusting me, because this is a leap of faith for all of you to trust me to do this. And there's definitely a lot of anxiety I had about the show, about what was going in, how it would be presented. So, you know, the biggest thing I want to say is I'm just so grateful that you all allowed me to do this. You know, without you, this kind of exhibition and what it does would not be possible. And I can only just, you know, be really thankful for allowing me to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, my apologies for the initial technical difficulties. I hope you were able to at least catch up on the things we were saying and the things were being said, and we were able to recover some of those things were being said. Special thanks to Ryan Casey, of course, for putting this show together and being such a fantastic partner here at the gallery. And thank you, Kate and Tamara and Bridget and Janelle for being here tonight. And thank you all for being here as well. And thank you all on Zoom. And everyone have a great night. Bye, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.